All right, hello everyone. It is Tuesday, November 12th, and welcome to Game Music Composition. My name is Chris Latham, and I am the course director for the class, and we'll be hanging out with you through this month. Tonight's session, we have a lot of stuff to get into, and our main focus is really as an introduction or overview to the class to start out with. And then later on this evening, we will be getting into our first week's assignments, all of the new material that you have to start out the month here in week one. Due to the Thanksgiving holiday that's coming up here on Thursday, there will be no live class for Thursday. I will be sending out an archive, and I probably will just send it out at the same time that I send out this archive for tomorrow. If for some reason you can't make the live sessions, all of the archives are posted up the next day on Wednesday and Friday. They show up in your inbox on FSO. I post them up as an announcement. So I will be sending out this archive and might as well get started on the next. No reason to wait all the way till Thursday. That will keep us on schedule through this holiday break. But tonight, our main focus is just to get the class started. We're going to talk about what to expect from the class, from your different assignments throughout the month, and what I expect from you, and how everything is going to flow both in these go-to training sessions and through the material and assignments for the month. So the main focus here in the game music composition is to give you a sense of what it's like to work as a music composer for game projects, to give you an insight into this side of the industry and exposure into the types of projects and the types of knowledge and skills that are involved in this type of work. And there are certainly unique aspects of working on games and working in the medium of game projects, but there's also a lot of similarities in the creation of music for these types of games, or just games in general, really. And so we will be comparing, contrasting, talking about what's the same and what is unique to the world of music for video games. We will talk about the industry overall and what is the role of a music composer, what's kind of their day-to-day workflow or the overall flow of a project as it unfolds. The creation of the music, the composition, the production and understanding of your DAW and the tools, synths and sample libraries, and the actual production of the music is really quite similar to any other form of music, whether it's on a music album, whether it's for a film or television project. But of course, we will also get into what happens to your music to actually get it up and running in the game, and what control does the game have over your music, and how does your music relate to the game, and how does the game relate to your music. You have this extra layer of interactivity where the player has control or some sort of control over what's happening in the game. It's a constant feedback loop where the player reacts to whatever the game is doing, and then the game reacts to what the player is doing. And so in all of that, the music has to change and adapt dynamically to what is going on. We'll talk about how that works. The industry as a whole has certainly been shifting in all sorts of new and different ways, and this gives us a lot of opportunity for projects and working with all sorts of different types of developers and clients, where the game industry used to be and still kind of is at some levels the world of the big developers and the control or the you have to play in the world of you typically are working in the world of either Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo, depending on which gaming console you are working for, and it was like that for a very long time. The only way that people were playing games was to go out and buy their $50 game and put it in their $300 or $400 game console. But through the magic of the internet and new channels of distribution, people are playing games in all sorts of new ways. People are making games in all sorts of new ways and buying and selling games. And this just allows a lot of opportunity for newer developers and gives a whole bunch of different ways that people are now working with games and playing those game projects. It certainly is still, I mean, the Xbox and the PlayStation and the Nintendo are certainly dominant, and there's PC and Mac gaming, but now also there is people have smartphones and tablets, and people are buying games for $1, or they're playing for free and getting extra downloadable content, and games can continue going on after they've released with new updates and new changes and new content. So the great part about all of that is that it all needs music and sound. And so it gives us all different points of entry. It's not just the only way is to jump in the deep waters with the bigger game developers. There's a lot of smaller developers that are just as new at it as everybody else, and trying to figure out their path. So how do you work with a game developer? What is the general skill set that you bring to the table? What is some of the roles that you will play, and what is kind of expected from a freelance composer? And we will talk about things like who hires you and who signs off the paychecks and who has creative control, and how is it working in a team dynamic versus in that regard, it can certainly be similar to film or television, where you as a music composer are working to somebody else's creative direction and goal. It is a team effort to create or produce this final product. Compare that against a music album, where typically if you are the artist or the producer, you have a lot of direct creative control over the final result of the project. And we will talk about how those kind of ideas all work together in the game project. We will spend more of the kind of first half of the month talking more towards topics the creative side, and how do you start from nothing on a game project and start building out ideas, and not only just creative ideas, but building your tracks and inside of your DAW and starting from a blank session and building up your music in a way that's formatted to work properly in a game. We'll talk about how do you dissect a game project, figure out where music goes, where music fits, how much music you need, what type of music you need, where does it all, how does it all place in the game and work across the overall arc of a story project. But then towards the second half of the month, we will start getting into more of the technical side of things, because in this industry or this type of this type of project, there is a technical aspect in the fact that it is software. It is a game. It is something that runs on a computer, and so it is a blend of all of the creative disciplines of the music and sound and art, along with all of the technology, the programming that makes it all work, either on your computer or on a gaming console or wherever it is. So we'll talk about how your music actually gets into the game. And this is really where people coming into this industry, really where the challenge lies. People have an experience with audio and music. I know how to make music. I can write in a variety of styles for whatever the client needs. I know how to make that music, produce it, finish it, format it, and bounce it out and get it all perfectly prepared for the client. But then what happens to all of your WAV files to actually get them working in the game, so that when the player enters that area, the monster is revealed and there's a big flourish of music, and that goes into a battle loop or a music cue that represents all of the action that's going on screen, and eventually you're going to win or lose when you're battling this particular enemy. And so their music has to react to all of that. How do we write music that needs to change in reaction to all of the action that's going on screen when we don't know what's going to happen? I mean, we generally have an idea, right? You know that you're going to walk and enter this area where the big boss enemy is, and the music needs to change at that point, and then you battle them for a while, and you don't know how long that music is going to need to play. You don't know how long the battle is going to go on. You don't know if the player is going to win or lose, or how they're going to win or lose. And so how do you create music that reacts to all of these changes? So we'll be talking about certainly the unique aspects of music for games, that interactive nature, where if we don't know how anything is going to happen or when it's going to happen, how does the music react to all of that? And so one of these ideas is that music does not exist in one linear format or file throughout the entire game. When you watch a movie, right, you put the DVD in or you stream the movie or however it comes to you, there is one audio file that represents the entire audio mix that you hear. It's a mix of the music and sound effects and dialogue, but it is one file from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, and it plays all the way through perfectly in sync with the image. And every single time you rewind that back, it's going to start over from the same point, and the action scene is going to happen in exactly the same way, and the changes in the storyline, the different plot points, the ups and downs of the storyline, all of that stuff is going to be exactly the same every single time you play that movie. That's one of the larger differences when compared to a game project, where there is not just one piece of music that or one file that represents all of the music that plays from the beginning of the game all the way to the end. People get lost in games for a very, very long time. Games are a couple of hours long, 10 hours, 20 hours, 50 hours, 100 hours. People get lost in games for a very, very long time. That does not mean that there is a 100-hour long piece of music that plays all the way through. However, the player is hearing music all the way through. So how is that built, and how is that created? So the quick answer to that is that music ends up being a series of lots of little files that are stitched together or rearranged in new orders and new ways by the game in real time. The music was written by a human composer at some point beforehand, and that's certainly your job as the music composer for the game. But the individual pieces and parts are rearranged and put back together in reaction to whatever's going on screen. So we know that there's a period of exploration for a little while. You don't know how long that might take, so we're just going to create a loop, and that's going to go around and around as long as it needs to. We have a piece of music that is the monster reveal music that happens and plays once when that monster first comes out, and then there's an action loop that plays as we battle the monster, and we don't know how long that's going to take, so it has to loop around. And then there's winning music or losing music, depending on the reaction or the final result of the battle. And that, all of those different ideas exist in little musical chunks that we have created specifically for these different parts of the game. We don't know when those things are going to happen, but we know it's what's possible. We don't necessarily know the when of the story or the timeline, but we created the game, or at least the team did, so we know what's possible out there. And so we can just create music for all of these different instances and what might happen through the game. And then the game, as it shifts and changes, plays the correct piece of music in reaction to all of that. So these are some of the ideas that we'll get into. Looping music for games is extremely important, or a very useful tool, because it allows us to kind of sit in one place musically while we wait for some action to happen on the screen, and then when that's completed, we transition properly into the next piece of music. So we will talk about the creative side. How do you determine what type of music needs to be built for different parts of the game? And then we'll talk about, once that music is composed and created, how does the game actually take all of your wave files and do the correct thing with it, so that when the player hits that button on the controller or enters that new area or that particular action happens, then they hear the correct piece of music. So throughout the month, we'll have creative topics, technical topics that we will kind of blend together. I do want to say that when we talk more about the technical side, that of course it is can get to be a really deep rabbit hole where it's a piece of software, it's code somewhere, and so it can go really deeply technical very, very quickly. But that's not where we are going to, the position that we're going to take a look at it from. I always want to start out with a couple of disclaimers about the class pretty early on, and they relate to more of this technical side. So first disclaimer about the game composition class is that you don't actually need to be any good at video games to be successful in this class. I understand that folks coming through this class have a wide variety of experience with games. There are some that eat, live, and breathe games and are up on the industry and are playing the newest and latest games and know what's out there and are paying attention to the music and sound and audio and the industry as a whole. And that is great. I can completely nerd out with you in all sorts of aspects of the game industry, and I can talk about different games and the music and the composers and all of that aspect. I absolutely love it. That's what we're here for. And I also understand that there are folks coming through the class that haven't touched a game since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man or they were playing Minesweeper or chess on their computer, and that is perfectly fine also. Where your skills at the playing the video game is of no importance in this class. What is of importance is your skills at the creation, the production of your composition, creation of the music, your skills of understanding theory and composition and orchestration and production and understanding your DAW and all the tools and synths and samplers and plugins and effects and automation and bouncing out, all of those things that you have been learning throughout the month throughout the entire degree program, those are the skills that you bring to the table. It just so happens that we are applying them to game projects. There are certain aspects that are unique, but really the largest portion of the work is very much the same. It is the creation of the music in your DAW. So that's number one, is you don't have to be actually any good at video games to be successful in this class. However, we will completely immerse you in games and the industry, and we'll be talking about all sorts of stuff and what's happening out there. And of course, the holiday season is here, and so there's all sorts of new games and all sorts of cool things to talk about out there. So if you haven't been playing video games, that's perfectly fine. We give you video games to play, and all of your game projects are working video games that you will be creating the musical soundtrack for, and all of the sound effects. So if you haven't up to this point, we will completely immerse you in that side of things. So that's number one. Number two is a question that I get very early on in the class often, and goes along with the discussion of the technical side of things, and that is, do I need to be able to code or program in order to work on games? And that is a pretty big no overall. Your skills that you bring to a game project are your skills of the creation of the music. Initially, most composers they create the music, and their job responsibilities end with the delivery of the final approved music. Right? You probably don't knock it out of the park the first time. It's a back and forth. You send them an idea and they go, I like this, but I don't like this, and change this, and this is more of what we want. And then you go back and forth and you keep working on it until everybody approves and you reach the final version. And then it's often somebody else's job or responsibilities to actually make sure that those WAV files are hooked up into the game and are playing back correctly. So there is certainly a technical aspect of it, and a lot of more experienced game composers over time will start learning some of the technical aspects, because it's kind of like giving your music to somebody else to mix, where they have their own creative ideas and their own control over everything. And so maybe you hand your tracks over to somebody else to mix, and what they give you back is not necessarily what you expect. Same sort of things. A lot of composers realize that they send their music off to the client and they get paid for it. But once it's actually in the game and they hear it back, it's like, well, that's not exactly what I intended or the way I expected it to play back. And so if you do understand and learn some of the technical aspects, then not only are you more valuable as a composer, as an audio creator, but you have more control over the process. It's kind of like there's a lot of folks coming through this degree program that started out as a musician, know their instrument, can play, and they want to learn more of the technical side of the production inside your DAW, and how to record, and how to mix, and how to get a professional sound overall through the technology. And there are other folks coming through the degree program that started out in the technology, understood the software and all the gear and the microphones and how to set things up, but may have less of like direct musical theory skills and want to learn that aspect, right? So the production of music for a music album is a combination of creative role and technical roles, and it blurs together. And as technology moves forward, it's not just I'm an artist and this person over here is a recording or mixing engineer. A lot of people kind of blur those lines, and a lot of solo artists have learned that they can have a lot of creative control if they learn how to do all that stuff together. So similar sort of ideas. So those are my two big disclaimers early on is that you don't have to actually be any good at video games to be successful in this class. And number two, you don't have to know how to code or program and initially understand all of the technical software that's involved. But over time, a lot of more professional composers, game composers, find that skill set to be very, very valuable. All right, what else? More about the class itself. Let's do our these Tuesday and Thursday night sessions. This Tuesday night session tonight is quite a bit different than the rest of our Tuesdays because there's a lot more overview and introduction information, and then you also haven't done any of the assignments yet. So starting next Tuesday, with all of the Tuesdays for each of our 4 weeks, we always start out with the new assignments for each week. So in our first meeting of the week, we definitely want to talk about all of the new projects, and we'll go over and listen to examples and break it all down. Starting next Tuesday, in the second half of class, we go back to the previous week's submissions, and you have an opportunity to submit your work so that we can talk about it live in the class. And it gives everybody an opportunity to hear what everybody else is doing, and it also gives the individual the opportunity I'll go over it live and have a video review of everything. If you're in the class, you can ask questions and more clarification and comments and all that stuff. Everybody on all of their assignments will get individual feedback, documentation of everything, but the live sessions give you the opportunity to, I can point things out and see things more. And it also gives everybody else an opportunity to hear everybody else's stuff. So while you're going to get individual feedback, you're going to hear things, and I'm going to say stuff about other people's projects that you would never even crossed your mind. Good stuff and bad stuff and things to try and stay away from and all that sort of those ideas. So there is a peer review and feedback submission, completely optional, but it gives us some good material to talk about. Question here in the chat. Liam, is the gaming industry looking for composers that game? Absolutely. If you are wanting to be successful in the industry, then you definitely need to know the industry, know what's is current in games, and play games, and completely immerse yourself in that industry. And that is the case for whatever industry you're going into. If you want to be if you want to be a recording artist, you want to be a producer, you want to work in a studio, you want to work on music albums, then you need to completely immerse yourself in the music industry. You need to know all of the artists, all the producers, all the record labels, all the studios, what's popular, why is it popular, even if you love it or hate it, why is everybody buying it, why is it cool, how did they do it, where did they do it, who worked on those projects. Just completely immerse yourself in all aspects of the music industry. If it's movies, if you want to be in the film industry, then you need to be watching every movie, understand the history of, have a vocabulary of the industry and of movies, watch credits, pay attention to the composer, the producers, the directors, the production companies, the movie studios, just every aspect of the movie industry. And if it's the game industry that you're interested in, then you need to be playing games and up on who all the composers are, and again, watching the credits and what game studio, what developer did it. And you just need to be able to talk the talk, because a client is mostly going to speak in terms of previous games, right? Most creative ideas come in the context of some reference before. They probably aren't going to ask you to do something that's never been invented before. They're going to say, hey, did you see that game and that movie or that album? I really liked this sound, and I like that aspect, and I like this emotional response that I got from this, and that's what I'm talking about. So it's often in the context of the industry and the media, whatever you're in. So absolutely, if you aren't already a gamer, then I mean the great part about it is it's video games. So it's not like it's hard work to keep up on the industry. And so just whatever part of the entertainment or music industry that you want to be a part of, you're just going to eat and breathe and live it all the time. And that allows you to know what's going on and what people are referring to and the context of what they want to create their projects in. So absolutely. I find one of the best ways of networking is getting with groups of people that are in the industry and finding them online and gaming with them. We keep up a lot of contacts because of people that we have on our PlayStation or Xbox. Not entirely, but that's can be one aspect of it because, again, through the internet, you don't have to be located next to in the city or the town and see them face to face. You can always interface online. And so this gives a lot of opportunity overall. All right, so that's an overview of our Tuesday night sessions. We're going to have a review of the new assignments and, discussion of the new assignments and a review of the previous week's assignments. On Thursday, our classes are more topics and slides and presentation, information about the industry, talking about the creative role of the music composer in a game. Let's see, this Thursday, which will be sent out as an archive, is focused on the industry itself and the role of the music composer in a much larger game team and the different who hires you and who do you work with and just some introduction terminology as a whole. Week 2 is more about the creative side of things. How do you get started from just nothing and build up a music soundtrack for a game? Week 3 is more of how the music operates in the game itself. And then week 4 is certainly diving into the software and the technology and how it all works together. So that is the general flow for everything in our class, and certainly we will get into all of the assignments. Introduction. This is me again, Chris Latham, course director, and I've been with Full Sail for 13 years, 14, something like that. 2002 to 13. And I started out in the studios on campus and worked in the post-production side of things, worked with the consoles, and the post-production, music and sound and dialogue and sound effects, more commercial corporate work was more of my background before Full Sail. And then Full Sail got on the game audio train about 7 or 8 years ago, and we did a campus game audio class, and then about 3 years ago now, the game music composition class in the music production degree came online, and so I jumped over and started doing this, and have been online for the past 3 years or so, and in January start back on campus. We're moving the class over to campus, which is very exciting. So lots of good things overall. Contacting me, always good with any sort of issues or positive or negative or whatever, anything you want to discuss about the class as a whole. iChat, messages, and email is probably the best way of getting in contact with me. I'm always connected to my computer. The phone on my desk, you can certainly give me a call there. I am at my desk Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 5. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm not at my desk. I'm teaching the class, And so if you call my phone and I am unavailable there, you leave a message, but also email me and let me know, because I might not even get it until the next day. So I can always respond quicker over the email. Other than that, I have an external game audio company website, Engine Audio. You can find me on Twitter at Engine Audio. However you want to keep in contact. Well, those are probably not good while you're in the class. These are the best, more full sail official way, but beyond the class, certainly keeping up. So, yeah, I think that's everything. Other than this short Thanksgiving break, the rest of the month should be pretty smooth overall. As always, just get in contact with me as soon as you can, and we can resolve any sort of issues with the class. Projects. I've, like I said, I had more of a background in music and audio in other formats. Like a lot of folks working in the game industry, they started out in other places, and really the game industry has just been moving on and getting bigger and more complex and more available for people. Just the music has become more detailed and requires more hands working on it. So let's see. I started out working on some smaller independent game projects, and then we are lucky to have we have EA Sports here in Orlando, and it's not all of EA Sports. It's Tiburon, which is one of parts of EA Sports. They do things like Madden and NCAA and PGA Tour and FIFA and Need for Speed and all of those fun games. So I started working with them, still do, every once in a while. They are cyclical game projects, right? They get released with each season, so they call us up for their different seasons. And currently working on a game called Depth, Sharks versus Divers. Let's see, what else? Mostly EA Sports kind of stuff. Had a very, very small role in Assassin's Creed, recording some of their cannons for the game. But a couple of smaller iPhone and iPad games, all sorts of different aspects. So whatever interests you in the music industry, the game industry, all of that stuff, hardware, software, whatever you want to chat about. Of course, the class and the material and the assignments. We can discuss any of those aspects. Just reach out to me and let me know, and I can certainly help out with all sorts of different stuff. So our focus through the month, of course, is number one, to write music. With each week, we have a new game, or at least with week 1, 2, and 3, we have a new game project. And each one of those games requires a music soundtrack. So, of course, you will be writing a bunch of music for the month. And of course, playing video games. I have a very, very important concept in this class, which is called game research. And game research means you should be playing video games. Whatever interests you about the industry as a whole, you need to be participating in it. And so if anybody asks you, why are you playing video games? You're saying, I'm doing game research. And that means, of course, playing the video game, but it also includes certainly paying attention to the music and the sound and what works, and finding things that you don't like, and how it all works together. So if you have no video games to play, we provide you with games, of course, in all of our game projects. Our games our game projects, each of your assignments each week, are fully working games. They're Mac games that have the ability where you can switch and change out all of the sounds and music. So you will create the music, and then you will format it properly, and you put it into the correct location, and the next time you load up and play the game, the music works. So you will have fully working demo games with your custom music soundtrack in them. So, of course, writing music, playing video games, and all of that great stuff. We'll also be throwing a whole bunch of knowledge and new stuff to learn and discuss. There are certainly new and unique aspects in how all of this stuff works together. So, this is the general direction that we are going to be headed throughout the month. That pretty much gets us through just kind of the overview of what's happening this month. So we'll start talking about the assignments, kind of a general overview of the assignments through the month, and then we'll drill down to specifically our week 1 assignments. So first thing to point out with all of your assignments is don't fail, right? That's easily said and not necessarily difficult to do. It should be a challenge and should be a lot of effort and thought on your end, or thoughtful effort on your end. But there are some tried and true ways of having success in this class. That's really what I'm getting at. To find success in this class, number 1 is to download the newest and latest material and check out the assignments and the games as soon as you can. So that means, downloading everything, reading through all of the assignments, getting an understanding of what that means early on. Even if you're not starting on day 1, download it all, read through it, get a sense that you understand what's happening musically, what's happening technically. Open up and play the games and check that out to just get a sense of what's required for each week, so that if you see anything that's giving you trouble, things are not working technically, whatever it is, you can contact me earlier on in the week, and we can always work through whatever issue it is. So that's number 1, is communication. Downloading the materials, getting a jump start on everything, and letting me know earlier on, because I'm not really going to be much help over the weekends, and you need to be able to figure out if there's any sort of issues earlier on. And I guess if all hell breaks loose, then we can fix it after the weekend. But that's always the best to get it taken care of earlier on in the week. So let me do my weekly poll here of, number 1, have you downloaded all the assignments for week 1? And number 2, have you checked out and played the game, our first game for this month, which is 2D platformer? Give me a heads up in the chat, a yes or a no, or going to, or something like that, where you have, number 1, downloaded all the materials, all of the assignments, and number 2, actually played the game. So anytime now, go ahead and throw that up there. Yes on the first, no. Family is here for Thanksgiving. Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Download it and take a look. Download, haven't played. Very good. Okay. Well, definitely check it out, download it, and we're going to see the game here. Always try playing the games, checking them out to get a sense of what is involved with all of that. So here is a breakdown of the first week's, actually, here's a breakdown of all 4 of the week's assignments. These break out to 25%, so for the 4 weeks, that'll add up to our full 100%. The game composition, that is each week's new game project. It is the larger of the projects each week. And a lot of times the technical assignment and production technique are kind of based off of the game and the game composition. So often that might be where you start out with, and then your technical assignment takes some aspect of your game composition and does something technical with it. Your production technique is a technique of production. It's some sort of workflow that is involved in the creation of music for games. It's allows you things to be easier or more efficient in the production of the music. So we'll certainly be talking about all of those assignments for week one here in just a bit. And there's certainly things that I want to point out for each one. Well, we have a new game project each week. This week's technical assignment is about doing formatting and delivery of your files, the proper way to format and deliver each one of the assets that you create, and creating files in multiple different formats. There is one of the very specific technical things that you will encounter through this month is the fact that the games are the game and software and computer are relatively stupid in the fact that it will only do exactly what you tell it to do. Meaning that the game is looking for audio files, WAV files that are formatted in a very specific way. It has to be named exactly as indicated. It has to be formatted with the correct sample rate and bit depth and number of channels before the game will even play it. And the game doesn't know and doesn't care. It doesn't know that you meant to spell it a different way, or that you meant to capitalize it, or that you meant to put an underscore instead of a space. It's just not going to work. And it won't crash or anything like that. It's just when you hit that button, it's not going to play the sound. And it won't tell you why. It won't error or give you an error message. It just won't work. And you'll have to figure out what's incorrect with the files in order to get it to work. What else? Your other technical assignments through the month will be doing the sound design for your games. So each week, week one, you will be doing your first game composition. Then week two, you will be doing your second game composition, but technical assignment, you'll be going back to your first week's game and doing all the sound effects. So by the end of the next week, you will have completed both music and sound design for each one of the games. By the time you get to the end of the month, you will have 3 games where the entire audio soundtrack, music and sound effects are all your work. So while these games are all well and good as projects and grades in the class, their real purpose is to be demo material, something that you can add to your portfolio some way, and medium to show off your work. And so the ultimate goal is to create the best sounding demonstration of your music in a game. Your production technique. This week it is all about looping files or looping music. Loops are very, very useful for games, and there are straightforward, easy, obvious ways of making loops, and there are other techniques that might even be more specific and useful for game projects. You want a loop to be invisible as much as possible, where you want the player to get lost in the loop. You don't want them to know that, oh, the loop just started over again. And then, oh, look, it just started over again, over and over again. You don't want to annoy or frustrate the player by having them realize that they're lost in a loop. So, or that they act not lost, that they actually know, hey, that's a loop playing. It's not just one long piece of music. So we'll talk about different techniques for that. You will be doing a composition in the style of a retro 8-bit chiptune composition, where it's in the requirements and restrictions of the original Nintendo games. And we'll talk about the history of audio for video games over the different decades and different generations of gaming consoles. So all sorts of different projects that you'll be working on. The kind of the flow is the same. Each week you have a new game composition, technical assignment, and production technique. There is also a 20-question quiz each week on FSO, and those questions are heavily based off of the Thursday night slides and this Thursday night presentation. So you might want to hold off on the quiz until after that session, And if you have any questions on it, I mean, certainly take a look at it. If you have any questions on it, you can ask in the class, and we can go over any sort of questions or issues. This week there is a discussion. It is an unweighted open discussion that is meant for. It's a kind of a easy overview question of do you play games? What games do you play? What's your favorite game? What's a favorite musical memory from a game? And just to kind of get a sense of what is where everybody is at with the game projects. Let's see. What else? That's mostly it from the assignment point of view. Let's talk specifically about our games. Each week we will start out. We'll take a look at 2D platformer. We're going to go into this one in a lot more detail because, of course, this is the one you're going to be working on each week. But then we'll also point out games for week 2 and week 3. So hold on just a sec. I'm going to take a quick pause here. And if you have any questions, this is a good time to ask them. And it'll be like less than a minute or so. Hold on. All right. So our first game this week is called 2D Platformer because, and it's very cleverly named, because it is a 2D platform game. And what that means, a platform game is, this is more of a classic style of game where the main purpose of a platform game is for you to jump from one platform to the next. And you are also often given some sort of attack. This game, you can shoot at the enemies. But platform games have the history of Super Mario Brothers, Mega Man, Contra, more of the modern versions. There's Braid is quite popular, or has been quite popular. Super Meat Boy is pretty popular. Platform games have lots of history, and they can. The great part about them is they can just take whatever shape that they want. And we're going to talk more specifically about this and the music need for it and what that means. But the 2D platformer is a great place to start because it's a relatively simple type of game with simple requirements for the music. And it is... These types of games are kind of smaller. They're meant for a wide, kind of all ages audience for the most part. And this type of game is often where newer game developers might start out. And so these can be more of the types of projects that you might get earlier on. I guess I should also point out that all of our games this month are made in the Unity game engine. And we'll talk more about what that means over the course of the month. Maybe you have heard of the Unity game engine or the Unreal game engine. If you play a lot of games, if you play a lot of mobile games, you've probably played a game built with the Unity game engine or the Unity software. saying Unity or Unreal is kind of like saying Pro Tools or Logic. It is the main piece of software that somebody used to build their game. The Unity game engine has become quite popular for iOS and Android games. And so as we get more deeper into the month and into the technology, we'll talk about more of what that means overall. But you'll see this as soon as the games load up. It'll flash a logo that says Unity Game Engine, and just know that that's the software that is used to create all of these games. Next week is Angry Bots. And Angry Bots is a futuristic third-person shooter where shooter games are quite popular overall. Sometimes they can be first-person or third-person. First-person is you are looking directly through the character's eyes and you have the arms out in front of you. Third-person is the camera is located somewhere else, typically over the shoulder of the character, and you kind of get more of a bird's eye view of everything. And a shooter game is typically you are defending the Earth from the alien invasion, or you have to find and kill all the monsters, the zombies, or in this case it's robots, or whatever it is, right? It's always some massive wave of all of these enemies, and they've got crazy weapons, and you've got crazy weapons, and you go around, and it's all about the battling back and forth. So this game, the music requirements for this game, it's much more modern and futuristic. It's a much more modern production style. So synths and samplers and drum machines, electronic music works here, heavy rock or metal works here, just big intense music, orchestral music works here, but it's much more of a modern style. It can be gritty and dark and heavy and fast and all of those fun adjectives. And so you are, I don't know, some mercenary in this cool suit with a whole bunch of weapons, and you're fighting off all these robots that are trying to attack. So the music here is based off of the idea of ambient and action, where if there's no robots around and you're just kind of wandering through the game level, you are hearing a bass ambient layer of music. And then the robots jump out and you start battling back and forth, and it switches over to action music. And it's that transition back and forth in the gameplay. And so, like I said, this one's works a whole lot better with synths and drum machines and samplers and all that sort of stuff. All of those much more modern production styles, because next week is, week 3 is Palace of Ernthalion. And this one, we are going to strictly rely on an acoustic orchestral sound palette or instrumentation. So we're going to throw away all of the synths, all of the drum machines, all of the modern production styles, and go for more of a classic orchestral feel for this, because it is set in a fantasy world, probably in the world of dragons and wizards and kings and queens and magic, and a far-off fantasy time or world. And open world means that you are set in the middle of a story or in a world, in an environment that you kind of feel that you can go off in any sort of direction and do any sort of thing in any order, right? Some games have a much more linear progression, where you start at the beginning of level 1, you fight your way through level 1, and then you beat level 1, you go on to level 2, and then you fight your way through level 2, and it's almost like a maze, or you're like a rat going through a maze, and you go from point A to point B to point C. It's a much more linear progression. But in a lot of more newer game projects, more complex and big, they feel like you're the character in the middle of this large game world, and you can kind of go off and do any sort of thing in any sort of direction. Rockstar Games is really good at this, right? The Grand Theft Auto games. There is a story and a point to Grand Theft Auto, but nobody goes and plays Grand Theft Auto for a whole long time. In just that, they go and they cause all sorts of havoc and get the police 5 stars chasing after you and do all sorts of weird, ridiculous things. And this is also in the line of like Skyrim, which is a very popular game, open world fantasy game, or Dragon's Age, or The Witcher 3 is out now. Fallout just came out. And those are open world games where you just are this character, and there is a point, there is a story, but you can just kind of go through it in any sort of way. So how do you create music that is going to react to something where the player can kind of do whatever they want? So yes, yes, there is a point A and a point B and point C all the way to point Z, but really what the player is going to do is they're going to go to point R, and then they're going to go to point G, and then they're going to go to point X, and just kind of go in any sort of order, and how does the music react to all of that? So different approaches, excuse me, pardon me, different approaches, different musical needs from your soundtrack, different musical approaches of how the music is going to work in the game. So we have 3 games this month. There is no new game project for week 4 because we don't have an opportunity to do revisions. There's no week 5. So with each week, you have the possibility to do revisions. And so let's see, on Sunday, you will turn in your first round of assignments for week 1. I will grade through everything on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then by Wednesday, you will receive back all of your grades and for that week. And then on Thursday, a revision assignment opens up. So Thursday and Friday, you have the opportunity to take and make any of the changes that, that is pointed out in all of the grades and the feedback, and make changes and update not only your grade, oh my goodness, pardon me, not only your grade, but the quality of your project overall. So that is one of the best ways that people have success in this class, is the first round of grades, especially in like week 1 and earlier on. There are new things that you are learning in the approach for games that you might have some trouble or issue with. So typically the first round of grades are a little bit less than what people would hope for or might get overall. And so it's a games project, and this might or probably is the first type of game projects that you've worked on. And so I don't necessarily expect you to hit it out of the park first time every single time. And again, while the grades are all well and good in the class, the real purpose of all of these compositions is to show off your best work. And so we should have the ability to do a draft of everything and get some feedback on it, and then make the changes and improve it overall, improve the quality of the music, and of course improve the grade too. So while people might have lower grades to start with, I've easily seen 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 point swings of the grades, because typically the things that destroy your grade the fastest are the things that are easiest to fix. Like I've said, throughout the month and throughout your assignments, there's a technical aspect and there's a creative aspect to everything. The technical aspect is, did you name the files right? Did you bounce them out correctly? Are they formatted with the correct sample rate, bit depth, number of channels? Do they loop properly? Is it mixed properly in that it doesn't completely overload and distort everything, or it's not so incredibly small and quiet that you can't hear anything? Those are more of the technical cut and dry aspects, and they are really easy things to fix. But they also completely destroy your grade, because if you mess up, like misname something, you also typically do it across like 5 of the files or all of the files, and it will hurt the grade pretty readily. But it's also really easy things to fix, and so those are the things that help that big swing of points, because it's like, oh, you named this incorrectly. There's a space in every single file. Wow, that took 20 points off, but man, if I just delete the space and put it back, I get my points back. So those are easy things to fix. So if I'm talking about that stuff, that's a little bit, it's worse. It'll hit your grade hard, but it's easy to fix. If I'm talking more about your composition, your choice of instrumentation, your choice of mix in the actual detail and setup of the mix, these are more of the creative side of things. And these are less weighted overall, and more in the getting the best result possible. So that's a good place. If I'm talking about those aspects of your composition, your instrumentation, your mix, then those are the good aspects, and that's the place you want to be, because that means you got the basic stuff covered, and now we're just making it as best as possible. So each week you have the opportunity to do revisions, and it's again, revisions are optional, right? If you get a perfectly satisfactory grade on it, then there might not be a need for revisions. That's typically with the production techniques and the technical assignments. With a game composition, there's often, if not always, ways that you can improve a composition. So point those things out, and we always want to have it rise to the best work possible. So those are our 3 games for the month. Let's go back, and we're going to talk more specifically about our first game here, 2D platformer. We're going to talk about the game itself. We'll talk about how the music is set up, how it works, and how it plays. I also have a logic session here, where we can listen to a couple of different examples and talk about all sorts of different things. So we'll talk about the game, we'll listen to some examples, and give you a solid intro into the project. I'm going to hit play, but I'm going to just take another quick pause here. All right, so here's 2D platformer. If you haven't actually loaded up and checked it out, there's a video here that's included with the assignment, so you don't always have to load up and play the game to actually see everything. I highly encourage you to play the game at some point to check it all out, but you can always refer to the video so that you don't have to load up the game every single time you just want to check one thing out. You can also throw the video into your logic session or your DAW, and use it as reference. You won't compose directly to it because it's not a linear composition, but it gives you an idea of what the game is all about. Let me throw this out there real quick. I don't think I haven't said this. I speak in terms of logic because that's what I assume that most people use, but you can use whatever DAW you would like for the composition and work on all of these assignments. I play this month as if I am the game composer, I am the client, I'm the developer, and I hire you as the music composer for my game project. In some aspects, I will play like I don't understand all of, or maybe I don't have the language that a music composer might. Meaning that a client, a game developer, isn't necessarily going to speak to you in complete terms that are correct and make sense in I don't know, the language of music, right? They speak the language of games. You speak the language of music, and you have to, a lot of your job as a game composer, and I mean this goes in all sorts of formats, is to interpret what the client actually wants. So your job is the creation of music. I don't care how you get it accomplished. I will, unless something happens, initially all I request is screenshots. I mean, I can request the DAW session if I need it, but for the most part, whatever tool you want to build my house, I don't care which kind of hammer you use. Just get it done. Whatever you feel comfortable in, that is the best tool to get the job done. Now, there are some assignments that are like the technical assignment in the game and the production technique that are like the screenshots and everything are in terms of Logic, and you would probably be best served to do some of those assignments in Logic. But for all of these compositions, for all of these games, however you want to get the job done is up to you. All right. So here is 2D platformer. As you can see, it is a fun and ridiculous game where you are the hero. Here is a bean with a bazooka and a monocle and a top hat. And you are saving, I believe this is London here. I'm pretty sure this is London. And saving it from the alien invasion. And for whatever reason, you are a bean with a bazooka and you can lay bombs and do all that sort of stuff. And you can tell it's London. I think this is like the London Bridge that's falling down. And where's my mouse? There it is. Here's the London Eye that's all blown up, and Big Ben and all that. So it's absolutely a ridiculous concept, but it's also very fun. And it's very good indication of these types of games. Simple type of gameplay. There's not much to it. But it's a fun and ridiculous concept and gives us a lot of material to work with. All of our games this month are not full, complete games. They are kind of slivers of a much larger game project. The amount of music that you will create is not on the terms of a large game project. The fact that you're building music that's 8 bars or 16 bar loops or 32 bar loops or minute-long compositions is not indicative of what a full game project might require, but we're focused on not only the music, but learning how all the music works in the game. So these projects are really good examples of what you might get early on in a game project working with a client, where one thing that you would probably realize early on working on games is that as a music composer, you are not you don't get the luxury of playing the final game until it's released and everybody playing it with everybody else. I mean, maybe like a week or two beforehand, but I guess what I'm getting at is the games aren't completed or done until the very, very end. And so you are working on a broken game for the entire production of that game, or the entire process, their entire timeline. Now, our games this month are finished and completed, so that we do have that advantage of actually being able to see and play the game ahead of time. But when working on a professional project, the game is going to take months, if not years, to complete, and you may not be involved in that amount of time, but and you're often brought in towards the end where there is more of a game to play, but the full and complete, fully realized game doesn't exist until the very, very end. And so you are working consistently in a smaller portion of the overall game. So these games each month, or this month, each week that we have are really in that sort of style, where they're not the full done completed games, but they are a portion of a much larger game. So the focus here, the musical approach, is we are going to be building our music and talking about the idea of intros, loops, and endings. And the music that you will create for this game is in those three parts. And we will talk about what all of that means as we progress forward. The next thing I guess I'll introduce is that I leave the style and the genre of the music for this game more open in our first project here, because I want you to write in the style that's strongest to you and that you feel is most appropriate for this game. A couple of things to think about would be that it is a pretty lighthearted game. It's meant to be age appropriate or all ages, family friendly, that kind of stuff. So it probably doesn't need to be too dark and deep and depressing, and needs to be lighthearted and upbeat and typically pretty fast-paced to reflect the action that's going on screen. But if it's orchestral or rock or hip-hop or electronic or whatever approach that you want to take, I leave that more up to you overall. Let's see. So I think we've watched him dance around here for a little bit enough. We'll definitely refer back to some of this, but let's go over here to Logic to talk about how the files are going to be set up. Now, this session is not like a Logic production session. This is the final result, right? These are 4 different student submissions. That is the final files that you will create. So for this project, you will be creating 9 files. 9 files that they all represent one whole piece of music, but it's split up into 9 files that are played in different ways at different times. So let's talk. I'm going to separate all these out and we'll talk about how the music is going to be set up. Remember, I said that our focus here is the idea or concept of intros, loops, and endings, also known as like start, loop, and stop. Sometimes you see it referred there. Hold on just a sec. All right. So, intros, loops, and endings. Let's jump over here to... Here's the PDF documentation for this assignment, and it starts out with an overview of the game itself and kind of just a written description of how things are going to work. Game overview: 2D platformer games have a long pedigree in the industry, like Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, Metroid, or 2D platformers. Limbo, Braid, Jetpack Joyride are popular ones these days. The idea of the musical style, I state that it's kind of up to you. The instrumentation and how it's going to work through the game. All of the music requires drums, bass, harmony, and melody. So it requires multiple layers of instrumentation to complete. This is really what I'm getting at. The asset list is a list of all the files and how they need to be created, how they need to be bounced and formatted. So we start out here with the file names. These are the 9 files that you will create. intros, main loops, and endings. We have 3 different categories, and each one of those categories has 3 different variations. So there's 3 variations of intro cues. I refer all to all the music as different cue files. Different, whether it's a looping file, whether it's short or long, or however many instruments, whatever it is. When I'm talking about the actual piece of music, I often refer to them as different cues. And so we have 3 intro cues. Those intro cues are going to be 2 bars each, and they need to be bounced out at 44K, 16-bit, and stereo. These intro files are not looping. They will only play through one time. So when the game starts, right, as soon as he drops in, right up here, boom, right there, then the intro, one of those 3 intro files plays. Now the game knows or is expecting that there are going to be 3 files in a folder, and those files are going to be named intro 1, 2, and 3. Then it just randomly chooses one of those files to play. That plays and will play for 2 bars, and once those 2 bars are done, then it immediately transitions to these main loop cues. The main loops are what you hear for most of the game while the game is being played. These are 3 8-bar loops that will randomly jump around in any sort of order to create the main portion of the soundtrack. 8 bars, everything's at 44.1, 16-bit stereo. These files are going to loop. And then there are 3 endings. So while this game is going on, it goes through, it'll choose main loop 2, and then it'll play through that. And then it can jump to main loop 1 and play through that for 8 bars. It can jump back to main loop 1 and keep playing the same one over and over again. It's completely random as it moves between the different cues. But eventually, the game is going to be over. And there's 2 ways that the game is over. He's got a little health bar up here that shows how much health he has left as he takes damage. And he can also fall. There's a crevice here at the bottom, and he can fall into all the toxic sludge below. So, let's see here. I think it's towards... Where is it? Right around here. He's losing all his health, and then bam. Right? As soon as that happens, as soon as he loses all the health and he falls off the screen, it immediately switches over to one of the 3 endings. These are 2-bar long pieces of cues, or 2 bars long of music. That's a bad way of saying it. They do not loop, and they only play through one time. The endings are the ending or resolution of all of the music. You basically are resolving the main loops to the end. So, to a finish or to a stop. So let's look at some of these. We'll start out just visually looking at them, and then we will talk, actually, listen. One thing to point out is, even though it is split out into 9 different files, these all need to feel like they come from the same song. It's like part A, B, and C of one composition. You have intros and endings, but they need to feel like they match the main loops. So the main loops are going to be the largest portion of your music. It's going to be really dictate your instrumentation and your melodies, and the progression of music. And then the intros and outros build up to that and release down from that main loop. They all need to feel like one song, because any of these 3 intros can jump into any of these 3 main loops, which can connect to any of the 3 main endings. So it could go intro 2 to main loop 3 to ending 3 to main loop, intro 1 to main loop 2 to ending 1. However, just any combination. And that means that the end of all of these files has to match melodically and harmonically with the beginning of each one of the other files. So as it rolls through main loop 1 here, when it reaches the end, it has 3 possibilities. It can jump to main loop 2, it can jump to main loop 3, or it can loop back. So main loop 1 could start all over again, main loop start all over again, main loop 1 gets to the end, jumps to main loop 3. Plays through that, jumps to main loop 2. Goes through 2, plays 2 again, jumps to 1, jumps to 3, jumps to just whatever order that it needs to go through all of them. So you need to, one of the best ways that you can maintain this, this consistency is to use similar instrumentation all the way throughout. It has to feel like the same band is playing the same song, right? Pardon me. Excuse me again. So similar instrumentation, same drum kit, same bass, harmony, melodic instruments, all builds the similar feel of the song. It needs to come from the same tempo. It can have be in the same key, can have variations on the chord progression, but it needs to feel cohesive overall. So what really defines and separates them is your choice of melody. Since we have no lyrics, the melodic line is really going to drive the direction of your music and provide variation. So while you have 3 different cues, each one should have its own melodic voice. There should be small variations to rhythms, bass lines, and chord progressions so that you have change overall. So let's go ahead and take a listen here. So we got some idea of what we're working with. Let me make sure that we can all hear this. Hold on. Nope. Output. Yes. What else? Let's do this. I don't need that actually. We'll just do it over here. All right, example 1. Let's make sure. First off, just give me a heads up. Can you hear that? Can you hear that in coming through? And can you still hear me? That's all what we need right there. Okay. So I'm actually going to start with the main loops over here. That'll kind of give us a definition of what we're listening to, and then we'll talk about the intros and how those sound. All right, so we'll listen to starting here with main loop 1, and I'm going to let it loop to give you a sense of a seamless loop and how smooth when it transitions from the end back to the start. So we can hear loop, right? You hear the little bit of percussion, bass line, the chord progression. It is a bit repetitive because it's doing the same flow even through the chord changes. Now, at any point here, when it reaches the end, maybe it jumps to 3 instead. Let's jump over here. Oops, jump to 3. There we go. All right, hear the changes in the rhythm, changes in the melody. Still same instruments, feels like the same song, just moved into a new location. Loops nicely when it goes back to the end. Now this time we're going to jump over to 2. It waits all the way through the end of the 8 bars. That's how it transitions smoothly. That's how it always stays in time. As long as you write the music so that the endings work with the beginnings, then it'll always fit. Whatever order, right? So it always helps to start back on your tonic so that you know wherever you go off to, you can always resolve back to the front. All right, so those are our 3 main loops, 8 bars long. They loop seamlessly, so it's invisible when you reach the ends when you go back to the front. I mean, visually we can see it, and you probably eventually be able to hear it and count the bars and beats, but you want to make it not no pops and clicks or gaps or fades or anything like that. And they each have their own musical voice. They have their own unique melodies, changes, and not really strong changes, but small changes to the chord progression, bass line, and rhythm. You can add instruments, you can take things away, but you should be constantly developing that melody. A strong melody is often what trips people up. All right, here are the 3 intros. Now these intros need to build, they need to rise and give you a sense of a build-up right before they drop into the main loops. They would just drop into whatever cue they needed to, whatever was randomly chosen. So now the game is going to be doing all of this switching. You don't have to loop anything. You just have to make sure the music in one of its instances would loop. You don't have to put them all together. The game is going to be doing all of the switching and randomization and variation. You just have to compose the music so that it makes sense when they're put together. Here's 3 endings. The endings need to, they generally have a downward direction and need to resolve strongly, come to a strong finish, end, and then get out of the way, fade all the way to silence. Right? So, however you build up and release back down, the real focus here is building up through the intros, maintaining consistency with variation through each one of the main loops, and then resolving everything strongly to a finale through these 3 endings. Let's do another one here. This one I think is a little bit more like electronic, much more like a classic video game, I think. Let's see. Main loop 1. Now there's a little bit of variation here, right? You got the first phrase stated, first half. It states the same idea again, but there's a little bit of change. You should probably have development and change all the way through. Here's a bit from a arpeggiator. Arpeggiators are kind of dangerous because they get repetitive, but if you have movement through it, it will work. It loops seamlessly. There's no pops or clicks or gaps in the playback. Right, so we have a halftime kind of cut time feel. Change to the groove. The melody is the same, but you would always want to develop that further. Let's do 3 intros. To watch out for these because these don't actually build. They feel more like 2-bar loops. They just kind of stay in the same place. They don't like rise up. This third one has a little bit of a drum roll. That helps. But it's just the drums. So you always want to have a strong build up and a strong release of everything. There's a solid ending. Variation of that. And notice it gets to silence before the file gets cut off. All right, so hopefully that gives you some ideas on approaches for the music and how it's going to be built for the game. I'm going to move on here to the rest of the assignments for this week. But if you have any questions, go ahead and post those up. Actually, a couple of things here to point out from the documentation. Compose interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. This is one of the biggest issues overall, is the fact that within an 8-bar loop, you have to develop over the entire 8 bars. You have to have changes in the first half and the second half. You can't just take a 4-bar loop and play it twice, or a 2-bar loop and play it 4 times. It's just going to waste file space, and you might as well just cut it in half and use only half of it. So make sure, and this is best done with your melody to develop all the way through. Transitions, make sure everything loops, make sure that loops transition fluidly. The beginning and end of each cue should match melodically and harmonically. That's going to be one of your biggest challenges, is moving from one piece of music to the next. Keep the same tempo. This would also be the same key, so that you don't go too far off, because you have to make it back. If you switch tempos and keys, then every time it looped, it would jump back to where it was, and then change again, and then jump back to where it was. So watch out. It's kind of, I mean, you can do that, but typically in 8 bars, you're not going to have enough time to do that. Continuous and seamless loops. Avoid gaps and fades and pops and clicks, and you want to make sure that the files, you don't want to make it obvious as to where the loop happens. And your overall mix, all of your files. While there's things to talk about within the context of your mix, overall, we don't want it to be so loud that it's completely distorting and overcompressed, or so small that we can't hear it at all. It's going to be drowned out by everything else in the game. Putting your music into the game. This is definitely important. This is something we want to point out here. Let's kind of move all this stuff out of the way. You can, of course, test out all of your music in the game. And that's really what the purpose here is to, once you create everything, is to actually put it into the game and play it and check it out. You're not going to get the best sense of how it sounds until you put it into the game. So here's the icon for our 2D platformer game. And in order to put your music and your WAV files into the game, you right-click and you do Show Package Contents. Doing that will show you a folder called Contents. This is one of these icons is really just a folder for other stuff. So you can go into Contents. Inside of Contents, you're going to find Data. And inside of Data, you're going to find Streaming Assets. And that's what it says right here, right? Contents, Data, Streaming Assets. And you're going to find 2 folders that are very familiar. Music and sound effects. I think your music folder is empty because that's your job, is to make the music. It has the original sound effects for the game, and next week you're going to be replacing all of these. But this is what your final output is going to look like. 3 endings, 3 intros, and 3 main loops, all WAV files, all formatted correctly. And then you place all of these files in this folder, and as long as everything's set up properly, the next time you launch the game, you will be able to hear it with your music. So you definitely want to test it out. More than likely, as you're working on game projects, you will find that what you bounced out of the DAW and what you expect to hear in the game might be different. It's not going to like completely recompose your music, but just it's going to play the wrong file at the wrong level at the wrong time, and it's just going to sound a bit off. So always test that out. All right. I do want to throw this out there. It is 9:45, and I label the class going from 8 to 9:30, and I try to keep it in that period of time, but I often go over, and especially when I'm like doing feedback of your music in the games, depending on how many people turn in stuff. I try to get everything done by 10 and not really go past that point. This first one's got a lot more material in it overall, so but stick with me, and that's I will always get through everything, right? However long it's going to take. But if you need to leave before that, I completely understand. You can catch the rest of it on the archive. So I always want to point that out. All right, so that's our game composition for this week. Let's do a quick overview for your production technique. Your looping music assignment, which I need to go load up. Let's see here. Only 8:45 here Central Time. Excellent. That works out. Let's see. Let me open up my version or demo of your production technique, which is right here. All right. So this assignment will have you creating loops in all sorts of different ways, or editing files to loop in lots of different ways. There's a quick guide here that basically summarizes a lot of what you will read in the PDF. But here is the main portion of the assignment. With part 1, part 2, and part 3, we have 3 folder tracks. And those folder tracks kind of separate out all of the assignments. If you haven't ever worked with folder tracks, these aren't track stacks. These are folders where you just double click on that region and it'll take you into that section. You can hit the up arrow over here. Will take you back out. Double click goes in, out, in, all that stuff. So looping files. Our first technique here is called topping and tailing. And hopefully you have created loops at some point at a previous time, and this is the most basic editing of loops. Editing music loops, editing pre-existing loops is a very common technique in games because oftentimes music is created in just a linear format without much consideration of where it's going to go in the game. I mean, it depends on the overall plan. And a lot of times you have a pretty specific idea, but as to the exact specifications of how long it needs to be and where it needs to be and the loop size and all that sort of stuff, sometimes that can come in at a later point. So you have to take a previous composition and edit it down. This is also a great job for an entry-level position or a junior composer or something like that, where they are taking other people's music and formatting it properly to work in the game. So this is straightforward topping and tailing, editing a loop. And so the first thing I would suggest you do is you just option drag and make a copy down to this edit track. That way you can just mute this, and if you completely screw up, you can always go back to the original one. Topping and tailing means find the top, or is that my phone? The top or beginning of the file, and then find the tail or the end. So with this piece of music, works very well because there's a crash cymbal in there somewhere. And that crash cymbal can be the beginning of our loop. And there's a lot of them, so we just find. Right, that sounded like a crash. Right, so there we go. So I have found the top of my loop, the beginning or the downbeat of everything. So I'm going to zoom way in here and find a zero crossing point right where that cymbal crash and all the kick starts. So I'm good there, and I hit S to split. And I have made my first edit at the top of the loop. Now I'm going to go for 4 bars or 8 bars or however long, find that next cymbal crash, and that will be the tail or the end of my loop. There it is. So there is the tail, the end right? So let's just zoom way in here, find that, another zero crossing point, and hit S to split, or whatever you changed your key to. And then that's it. There's my loop. Right, find the beginning, edit, find the end, edit, and listen to an amazing loop. All right. So then you would bounce that out and name it according to the assignment. And the assignment has you do this for 3 different intensities. Low, medium, and high is pretty common in games. And so we have 3 different sections here to edit out. So that's looping and editing loops in its most basic format. Hopefully that's nothing mind-blowing or brand new to you. And just find the downbeat, make the edit, find the next downbeat, make the edit. All right. So our next task here is, or part 2, is looping MIDI information. And that's pretty straightforward too. But there can be some unique aspects that we need to deal with here. So here's my next loop. Here's my electronic loop here. 4 bars. All right, and that's the music cue that I want to bounce out. There's a cymbal crash over here. That, and also if I stop, there's reverb and delay and all this extra goodness in there that all that stuff we want to keep. So we want to bounce this out, and we've got our beginning and our end all set up here. And the typical way you do this is you start out with Apple B and you bounce it out. We want a WAV file. We want it to be 16-bit 44.1. We want an interleaved file. We've got our start and our end, and all that's good. So, I don't want to normalize. No. Did that change file size? 2.4. Why would normalize change my file size? Anyway, 16-bit 44.1, all good. So, and we'd hit bounce. And it says, where do you want to bounce this? In the same location I've bounced all these other ones. We'll just call it electronic wave. Electronic. Yes, that is fine. So we bounce it out. And we're like, yay, we have a bounce. And we're going to create one new audio track. We don't want all this enabled. One new, yes, go. And then we take the file that we just bounced, and we're going to import this back in. Oh, I didn't import it into the project. Fine. Bounce it again. Bounce. Add to project. Forgot that part. Yes. I mean, I guess I don't have to do that. I could go search it out, but it's a whole lot easier if it just dumps back into the project. Replace. Now I go to my browser, and I take my electronic loop here, and I drag it in on my track. And I'm good, right? Now, problem. This is where the unique aspect comes in. Oh, my fader was down. Look at all these things I got to pay attention to while I'm talking. How about fader up, then bounce, then add to project, then name it electronic. Oh, fine. Electronic 2. Replace. Get this as pretty as possible. Electronic 2. There we go. Cool. Now, we listen. We listen to this electronic 2, and most of it should be good. But listen for that cymbal crash. Listen for all the delay at the end. The cymbal crash gets cut off. If I hit stop, there's none of that reverb. I mean, I guess it's in the bounce there, but it's not all live, and my cymbal crash gets cut off. It gets very obvious when this loops. All right, so how do we make this as invisible as possible? How do we make a seamless loop out of all of this? And what we're going to do here is we're going to take our MIDI information and we're going to hold Option, and I'm just going to drag a copy and basically double the length of everything. Then I'll double my marker or my marquee up here. I'll just double the length of everything. And that's really all I need to do. Now I bounce again. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Bounce, fine. We'll call this like track 3. Yes. And it bounces. And now we say, what's the difference, right? All I've done is bounced it twice as long. But the fun part here is if I go exactly halfway through at 197, and I just split this in half and delete this first half and only listen and use the second half. Now listen for that cymbal crash. You can actually hear it up here a little bit. That cymbal crash that was cut off over here actually was caught over here. And now when it stitches back together, it loops back around, the end of that cymbal crash that gets cut off is actually caught over here because it used to be one whole file. So when it played through this part and the cymbal crashed, then the tail part of that cymbal is still there. You can actually hear it as it starts, but it goes by so quickly and then it loops around and it's as smooth as possible. All that reverb and delay loops back around and is caught back in the beginning. So the main thing you're doing here is you're taking all of your MIDI, you're making it twice as long, you're bouncing it out, then cutting it in half and deleting the first half. Doing that will give you the proper result and give you a smooth, seamless loop. That works for, it's a great technique and you're going to be using it a lot for all of your compositions, for all of your looping material. Here's an orchestral loop over here that you will be building and using. And the last one here part 3 is looping stuff that doesn't loop very easily, like this, like this. Right, so this is a really cool ambient pad. It's got a whole bunch of changes in it, volume changes and pitch changes and timbre changes, and you want to make this loop. So I'm going to drag another copy out and just mute this top one, and I could spend a whole bunch of time here trying to find a place to loop, and I could probably get pretty close, but I'm going to do this just completely blindly just to see how good of a job I do, right? Of course I could pay a lot of attention there, but it's still kind of hard to make it loop. Let's see what I get here. Right? Really obvious when it jumps around that it's not a seamless loop. There's a real obvious hiccup. Alright, so like I said, I could probably take a whole bunch of time and make that work, but here's how we're going to make things loop very, very quickly. And the other thing to notice is that I don't need to pay a whole bunch of attention to where I'm making all of my edits. Of course, in a true sense, you would pick the points that make the most sense and work for whatever you're trying to do, but I'm just showing you here how quickly and easily this can be done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a place to start my loop and end my loop. So I just pick those parts and I just delete these other half. Then I'm going to take this part that I want to loop. Let's see here. Let's see how well I did. really bad. It's okay, but it's not, certainly not perfect. So, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to split this in half. Not Pro Tools. How about Logic? There we go. Split it in half. And I'm going to take the left side and I'm going to drag it over here past the right, or not past the right side, not all the way over here, but I'm going to drag it over to the other side and leave a little bit of overlap, right? So what I've done here is chopped it in half and then take this left side and drag it over here towards the right side, leaving some pretty decent overlap between the two. Now, the cool part is the end of my loop, the outside edges of my loop are perfect now. And they're perfect. They're perfect because they were the same file, right? They were just like this a second ago, which was perfect. So now I made my edit the outside edges of my loop. So I always know that's going to work. Now my problem here is the middle. There's this real obvious change. So all I'm going to do there is get my fade tool and do a big fat crossfade across the middle here. And it will now kind of fade through that edit and make things a lot smoother. So my loops become completely invisible, seamless, no pops, no clicks, no pitch changes, gaps, or anything, right? So again, all I'm doing is finding the beginning part, making a split, finding the end part, making a split, deleting my outside parts, then I go here, find some place to split, generally in the middle, come in here, drag the left side over the right, leave some overlap, go to my fade tool and crossfade. And I could do this all day long and with pretty good results, right? There'd be some parts that I'd have to maybe think about a little bit more. But notice I did it without even listening and it's gonna work. All right. Picked that up as a tip from the Halo team. They were just building tons and tons of ambiances and had a quick and easy way of doing it. So it always works. Now, this only works for non-rhythmic material. If this was a drum beat, I would have totally ruined the rhythm and it wouldn't work. But I can fake it if it's these kind of pad drone kind of things. All right. So that is your production technique. Just one quick last thing to point out is, where are my slides? Here are my slides. Production technique. Last thing is your technical assignment. Here is really just bouncing out files in the correct format. For your game, your regular composition, you're going to do 44, 16, 16-bit stereo files, CD quality, normal bounces. But you also bounce in multiple formats. Lots of games are released on multiple different devices. You make a game and it's released on PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo and Wii, PC, Mac, iOS, Android, especially when you get into mobile and web gaming. All sorts of different formats. So you will also take all of your music. Here's your 9 files, and you'll bounce them out as WAV files, 16-bit 22K stereo files. You will also bounce out core audio files, 8-bit 22K mono. So once you bounce everything out, you can choose WAV or core audio files. You can do 16-bit, 22K, and set up all of your formats. So there is a... What happened there? There is a technical assignment that goes through the entire process of how to bounce everything out properly. So go ahead and follow through all of these documents. PDF describing the process. I include all the grade sheets for your assignments, so definitely check those out. There's a flow on your production technique and how to loop everything. So a lot of information. Definitely download it and check it all out and get started. While hopefully you are not in a coma from all of the wonderful food and turkey that you might be eating through this holiday season, at some point can maybe get started on all of these assignments. So that is enough from me from this evening. Thanks for sticking around in this little bit of a longer session. I wanted to definitely get everything discussed and out there. So let's see. Download your assignments, check it out. Contact me with any sort of issues. No live class on Thursday. I'll be sitting out an archive with this. And then all of your first week's assignments are due on Sunday. And then we'll start all back again on next Tuesday with a live class. So let's wrap it up there. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes. You can ask anything that you need. But other than that, enjoy your quick holiday break here and maybe play a video game over Thanksgiving. But other than that, have a good one, and I will see you again on Tuesday. All right, thanks a lot.